Judy leaned her head back in the chair she sat in, allowing the warmth of the sun to wash over her face as she breathed in the clean air around her. The blue tank top and cargo shorts she wore, while allowing the brisk morning air to chill her skin, had been a smart choice as the day had slowly warmed. She had always enjoyed the brief trips she took to see her abuelas, taking any chance she could get to leave the noise and depression of Night City behind her. But, as it were, her trips had been few and far between in the years since they had moved away, and Judy had been shaken when she had noticed the latest passage of time on her abuela's face. Everyone is moving on. It was still too quiet out here for her liking. Too remote. As much as Night City had become suffocating to the point where she had to leave, she still liked feeling a sense of connection to people. Her desire to make a positive impact on things and to change lives for the better. It was simply too difficult for her to pursue those passions in such isolation. Still, though, in small doses, she found the opportunities to disconnect for a short period of time to be peaceful. Sitting on the porch with her abuelo, the two of them were enjoying the near-perfect weather. Some clouds had rolled in during the night, though there were still patches of sun which occasionally poked through. Her abuelo seemed to have recovered from the previous night's heavy drinking, opting for a beer as Judy sipped from her glass of water. Earlier in the day, after V had seemingly recovered from the effects the BD she had gifted her with had imparted upon her, they had talked about what they should do next. They were both in agreement that they would leave shortly after noon, deciding that the same motel they had stayed at twice already would make a good place to stop at once again the night before making the rest of the drive the next day. The thought of how the motel owner would react to seeing them stop in unannounced for a third time had made them both laugh. What they would do next, though, remained an open question. V had been cagey on the topic, which seemed odd to Judy since it had been her idea to try to use this time to figure out what they should do in the first place. But Judy had been equally short on ideas. She supposed that staying with the Aldecaldos would probably be their best option, having taken well to the few months she had spent living with them. It wasn't an easy life by any means, and they lacked many of the luxuries to be found elsewhere which were available to them if they wanted. But the sense of community and concern for their well-being wasn't something which would be found anywhere else. And yet, contrary to what Judy had suspected, V had been hesitant to commit to staying with them. There would still be plenty of time to think and talk on the way back, though, and Judy had chosen to enjoy the remaining time she had with her abuelas before they left. As though he had been reading her mind, her abuelo looked at her. You sure you want to head out today? You're both welcome to stay as long as you like. Judy smiled back at him as she stretched her legs out in front of her. Yeah, I'm sure. Got a long drive ahead of us. Best to just rip the Band-Aid off and get a move on rather than procrastinating. He nodded silently. Every so often, he would put his hand in his pocket and lean back in his chair, seemingly becoming lost in his thoughts as he idly rolled his bottle between his hands. After some time passed, he cleared his throat. Judy, something I want to talk to you about. The tone in her abuelo's voice immediately made Judy feel as though she were a child again, about to be scolded for having gotten in trouble once again. It had been a frequent and long-lasting conversation throughout the early part of her life, particularly in her teen years when her rebellious nature had really taken hold. It still made her wince when she would think back to how those arguments had often lasted well into the middle of the night. But Judy sensed this was different. Her abuelo was a blunt man and plain-spoken, certainly not someone to beat around the bush or ask if he could approach a topic with her. So why was he being so cautious now? Okay. Her voice was more of a question than an answer as she looked out across the surrounding trees. Your girl, V. She told your abuela and I about what's happening to her. Judy continued to stare straight ahead as the muscles in her jaw clenched. She had suspected V might have brought the topic up with him at some point over the last day. Though she had said nothing to prevent her from doing so and hadn't told V to avoid discussing it with them, it still made her feel uncomfortable that the two of them had talked about it already without her knowing, almost as though it were some kind of dirty secret. Her abuelo set his bottle down. "I'm sorry for it. Really seems like a good girl. Your abuela likes her, and me, well, what's the old expression? 2 peas in a pod?" "Something like that," Judy said as she continued to stare off into the distance. Without realizing it, she had started to bite at her nails. It was an old habit she had struggled with throughout her life, and particularly since she had given up smoking. "So tell me, how are you doing with all this?" "I don't know. I'm doing as well as anyone can be, I guess. Would rather not talk about it." Pablo nodded and leaned forward. "Judy, look at me." Judy did as she was told and tilted her head towards him. "We're old, Judy. I'd like to think we'll have many more of these good times ahead of us. Plenty of opportunities to have these kinds of talks, but..." Judy frowned as her abuelo spoke, her heart slowly sinking. He was right. They were old. And having chosen long ago not to artificially extend their lives by installing choom and implants throughout their bodies, it suddenly hit her. This might be the last time she would ever see them again. The thought stuck in her mind as she felt her face begin to flush and her lower lip tremble. Her abuelo reached out and gently pulled her nails away from her mouth. There was a small smile upon his face as he did so. "I understand why you don't want to talk about this, Judy. You know, in times of hardship, it's never too late to turn to faith." Judy's eyes widened. "Faith? Abuelo, I love you dearly, but please don't start in on that again. Faith never stopped anyone from swinging by Lizzie's to get a disgusting virtue tuned or to pop a load to an XBD they got on the street. Wouldn't have stopped Evie from slicing open her wrists in my own bathtub. And Faith sure as hell ain't gonna stop what's happening to V. It just ain't." Judy pushed herself out of the chair, storming across the porch before coming to a stop at the far end with her arms crossed. She hadn't realized she had been raising her voice to the point where she had nearly been shouting. "Of course it won't. Judy, you know this talk already. We've had it many times before. Faith isn't about making all the wishes you have in your life come true. It's about finding hope and strength within yourself to weather the storms that will cross your path." Judy turned to face her abuelo. "V talked to you, didn't she?" "Yes." "And think about that for a moment. What does it say to you that a woman with no faith or belief in God is so desperate for you to have a little faith?" "It tells me she's a complete gonk." Her abuelo laughed as he stood and walked towards Judy. "Maybe. What it really tells me, though, is she has hope for you. That she has faith in you. You should have some hope and faith in yourself also, Judy. Here." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a silver chain necklace with a familiar metal crucifix attached to it. Extending out his hand, he offered it to her. Judy stepped forward and slowly took it into her own hands, carefully weighing it and delicately running her thumb across its smooth metal surface. The heart of Laguna Bend. Of course, that had only been a joke she had told V when she had stumbled across a similar one during their dive. In truth, there were likely dozens of them scattered about the submerged ruins of her old town, the necklaces having been a gift from the church to all the residents who attended Sunday service. Cheap metal, inexpensive, and devoid of any real value. She had discarded her own many years ago, the memory of when and why she had done so no longer present in her mind. But this particular one was different than all the others. This one was her abuela's. "Abuelo, take it, Judy. Your abuela wants you to have it. Nothing more needs to be said about it. Just keep it as a reminder of my words." Judy looked up at her abuelo and searched his face as she tried to burn the image of him into her memory. With a gentle smile, he pulled her in and embraced her. She wrapped her own arms around him tightly. After a moment, he let go of her and, with a gentle squeeze of her shoulders, had returned to his chair. Judy looked down at the necklace once more before sliding it carefully into her pocket. It didn't feel right for her to wear it. At least, not yet. The rest of the morning passed quickly, and before long, Judy and V had packed up their bags once more and had thrown them into the back of the car. Judy couldn't help but wonder at how easily V embraced her abuelas as they prepared to leave, particularly since the memory of V's earlier awkwardness when she had first met them was still fresh in her mind. What stood out to her even more, though, was how tightly her abuelo hugged V in return, even allowing his hand to pat her gently on the back of her head as he held her tightly. As he pulled his head away, he leaned in close to V and began to whisper something in her ear, which Judy couldn't hear despite her best efforts to eavesdrop. V nodded a few times as he spoke before she smiled and let go of him before giving Judy's abuela a final hug. V walked past her towards the car, briefly resting a hand on Judy's shoulder as she did so. Judy stepped away and walked up to her abuelas. Once again, she prepared herself to say goodbye to them, but this time felt different than all the others. She couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and fear. Te cuidas, Judy. Y cuidar de Vi también, ¿me oyes? Te amo. Her abuela spoke gently as she pulled Judy in for a hug. Judy wrapped an arm around her abuela, mindful of the necklace in her pocket. Gracias por el collar, abuela. No lo olvidaré. Squeezing her tightly, her abuela released her before heading back inside to give Judy and her abuelo a moment to themselves. Will you remember what I said, Judy? Judy nodded. I will. Bueno. Her abuelo pulled her in slowly. Judy felt his wiry arms wrap around her, the familiar sense of his love and protection of her taking hold once more. It felt like she was saying goodbye to him for the last time. Judy breathed in sharply and squinted her eyes shut as she sought to freeze this moment in time. She was still aware that V was watching them. Te amo, abuelo, Judy managed in a weak voice. Yo también te amo, Judy. With a final squeeze, her abuelo pulled away and again placed a gentle kiss upon her forehead. Have faith in yourself, Judy, he whispered. I'll try. They turned away from one another, her abuelo walking back to his porch as Judy ventured towards the car. She could feel V's gaze upon her. You okay? V asked as she stopped in front of her. Yeah, just didn't realize how much I missed him, how much I will miss him. V said nothing as she pulled Judy in, embracing her tightly and giving her a kiss upon the side of her head. They climbed into the familiar confines of their car with Judy once again taking the wheel. As they circled about, she glanced out the window one last time. Her abuelo was standing on the porch waving at her with a beaming smile on his face. Judy slammed on the horn once more as she waved back at him before they set off again. The day's travel was uneventful as they passed along the same roads as they had taken earlier, stopping at a small station along the way to fill up with fuel and grab a bite to eat. The sun continued to pass overhead. At one point in the afternoon, V had silently reached into their bags, rummaging about until she found Judy's BD wreath. Judy smiled as she watched V slide it on out of the corner of her eye. Moments later, V's breathing had deepened and her mouth had parted as she relived the experience Judy had crafted just for her. Afterwards, the effect had been the same, with V at a loss for words. Feeling a deep swell of appreciation and pride, Judy drove on. Late in the evening, they had reached the same motel and once again had pulled into its small lot. V had entered the office as Judy waited outside, watching the sun slowly setting over the distant hills. A few moments later, she emerged with a wide grin on her face. He's fucking bewildered. Kept asking why we keep coming back. Judy smiled. He's gotta think we're planning something. Definitely suspicious. But hey, we got our favorite stomping grounds all to ourselves again. Before long, they had settled back into the familiar motel room, and V had again put in an order for a pizza from the diner across the street, while Judy sat on the edge of the bed and slid off her boots. Tossing them aside, she rubbed the back of her neck. Her muscles were tense and knotted from the long drive. V stood and walked towards the door. Gonna grab our pizza. Want anything else? A Swedish massage if they got one. V rolled her eyes and left. Judy looked around the room, suddenly finding the silence uncomfortable. Quickly checking under her arm, she decided a shower was in order and headed to the bathroom. As she took off her clothes, she glanced at herself in the mirror. Though she had kept the area around her implant trimmed, the rest of her hair was getting longer. Even the pink highlights she had added to her roots just a few weeks earlier were starting to work their way further down. Just as she was about to slide into the shower, she stepped on something which pressed into the ball of her foot and made her wince. Lifting her foot, she saw a small pill pressed into her skin. Plucking it off her foot, she studied it. It was one of V's. Like a sledgehammer, Judy was suddenly hit once again with the reality of their situation. The pills were the only thing which were keeping V going, and soon she was going to need to stop taking them just to be able to keep breathing. They were a symbol not only of what was keeping her alive, but also of what was killing her. She felt blood rushing to her head, and her ears started to ring. Taking hold of the sink to steady herself, she lowered her head and set the pill on the porcelain surface. Without thinking, she glanced down to the pile of clothes which she had strewn on the floor. Her eyes drifted towards her shorts, and she caught sight of the silhouette of her abuela's necklace in the pocket. Shaking her head, Judy stepped back to the shower and turned on the water. Not long after, she was getting dressed when she heard the door open. Judy? In here. Just getting cleaned up. There was a brief silence. You, want any help in there? Judy rolled her eyes. Gonk. Real smooth, V. You're a Haywood gal through and through, aren't you? I'm starving. Judy stole a final glance in the mirror and ran her hands through the dampness of her hair. As she stepped out, the pleasant smell of the pizza immediately hit her nose. V was sitting on the bed cross-legged, the pizza box open in front of her and a slice in her hand, a large bite having already been taken out of it. She had ordered the same style as last time, half her favorite and half Judy's. With a smile spreading across her face, Judy walked towards the bed and sat down next to V while grabbing a slice from her half. They ate in relative silence while they occasionally made small talk. As Judy finished another slice, she shifted and adjusted one of the pillows so she could rest against the wall. V had uncharacteristically stopped eating a while earlier and was busy studying her hollow. Thought you were hungry, Judy asked. V glanced up briefly before returning her attention to the screen. I got my fill. Judy studied her for a moment. The expression on V's face was intense, and her fingers were dancing rapidly across its surface. A brief glow reflected in her eyes. What are you up to? V looked back up at Judy, and this time turned off her hollow and tossed it next to her. So, we gotta talk about what we want to do, where we want to go from here. Damn it. Judy nodded. She knew they had been putting it off and needed to talk about it, but something still felt wrong. People were supposed to plan where they wanted to live, not where they wanted to die. Is this what we're about to do? V must have sensed the turmoil of emotions within her. No, it's not fun to think about, even though it's supposed to be. Guess that's just my luck. But still, got a lead on something I think you'd like, if you're interested in having a look. Her interest piqued. Judy nodded and leaned forward. What do you got to show me? V shifted closer. Judy could detect a hint of nervousness in her demeanor. What would you say to going on an extended date with me to visit the warm and sunny beaches of Tijuana? Judy blinked. Tijuana? Here, let me show you. V grabbed her hollow and leaned in closer so Judy could see her screen. Judy glanced up at V. She could see she was biting her lip as her fingers danced across the screen. Her nervousness was quickly giving way to excitement. She felt a pang of guilt for not having sounded more enthusiastic when V had first proposed it. Here it is. Found us a small bungalow for rent right on the ocean front. Cozy, but not too cozy, you know? It's got all the trappings. Hot water, clean bedding, and a working generator I don't gotta fix. Best part? It's got a dock nearby, and there's a hotel not too far from it where we can always grab a few things and rent a boat. We can get you back in the water. Judy's smile slowly widened as V spoke. Even though it was requiring an increasing amount of effort to keep herself from crying, V had obviously put a great deal of thought into every detail, and all of it was meant for her. Didn't she want anything for herself? Unlike V, she still had plenty of time to experience more of what life had to offer. I don't know, V. As V frowned, Judy quickly added, I mean, I really like it, honestly. It's just, isn't this all a bit much? Or maybe expensive's the right word. V set her hollow back on the bed. Told you, Jude, I got eddies to burn. Lots of them. In fact, I kinda went ahead and already rented it out. V! And guess I should add, we don't need to bother with renting a boat. Just bought one. It's all ours. Or yours, rather. Judy's eyes widened in shock. V, what? How are we gonna live out there? Told you, we'll be near a hotel and not far from Tijuana itself. We can get whatever we need. Not to mention they got no love for most of the corpse down there. We'll be in friendly company. Judy shook her head. This was all happening too fast. But how do you plan on getting all our shit down there? Did you forget you got a motorbike still stashed in a trailer somewhere back at camp? Ain't gonna fit in the back of the Thornton. V kept her voice level as a look of suspicion began to form on her face. We just take with us all we need, Judy. The rest we leave behind. What about Pan Am? The Aldecaldos? Don't we need Judy? V raised her hand to cut her off. Let's cut the crap, all right? This ain't about the Aldecaldos or anything else. What's the problem? What indeed? V seemed to have thought of everything, and the prospect of spending some carefree time with her at an oceanside retreat with their own boat sounded like a slice of heaven. Except, she knew it wasn't truly carefree. This is just... It's all happening so quickly. Wasn't planning on moving out to the oceanside anytime soon, and then you just spring this on me. V nodded. I'm sorry, Jude, but we both know time's against us. I don't want to waste one more fucking second of it. Let's live a little. But this is all for me, V. Don't you want something? Something that isn't oceans, boats, and diving? Something for yourself? As Judy spoke, V leaned forward and took hold of her hands. Judy could still feel crumbs from their pizza brushing against her skin as she weaved her fingers through her own. V smiled. I'm gonna hit you with a really bad line now, Jude, so prepare yourself. But I already got something for myself. Judy scoffed and shook her head, unable to hold back a smirk. Oh my God. You're right. That is a truly terrible line, V. Heard better pickup lines outside of clouds. Judy looked down at their hands. She knew she was holding back. With a sigh, she decided it was best for her to confess her fears since V had brought up the topic days earlier. She had stressed the need for V to be honest with her more than once. She owed the same back to her. It's just, this feels like the beginning of the end, you know? And I don't want things to end, V. The familiar lump in her throat was rising again. She felt trapped between grief and being angry at her grief. But before the sadness could take hold, she felt V's hand under her chin, lifting her gaze to meet her own. Me neither, Jude. Things gotta end for all of us sooner or later, though. It's not the time we wanted, but it's what we got. I could have caught a stray bullet so many times in my life before I met you. Even caught a couple that weren't stray. Now I know it all led me here, to you, for this time. So, what do you say? Want to take a girl for a ride? Judy looked at the woman in front of her. Her head was cocked to the side as she waited for Judy's answer, her eyes conveying both the strength and vulnerability she had never seen in her before. Her hands were warm, radiating with the life which still burned brightly within her. She would never have guessed a few months earlier, when Evelyn had brought some random mercenary into her studio from off the streets, that she would have found herself here. Fuck it. Judy's lips formed a smile as she nodded. Hell yeah, I do. Let's do it. The rest of the evening they spent planning their impending journey to Tijuana. As they talked, Judy found herself getting more excited with each minute. Looking at the bungalow V had rented, it was a truly prime place. A 2-story vacation house which was situated right on the beach with a large wraparound porch. There was a large den and a gracious kitchen, along with a pair of bedrooms and a full bathroom with a separate tub and shower. Her attention kept drifting to the boat V had bought, though. She had known V had left Night City with a horde of eddies, but looking at the craft which was now hers, she realized she had grossly underestimated just how much. While nothing like a luxury yacht, the vessel still had plenty of room both in the front and the back to stretch out in the sun and to enjoy the water from. There was even a small cabin below deck with a small bathroom and bed. Judy had blushed when V had started talking about what to name the boat. At one point, V had suggested the SS Alvi, which had quickly earned her a one-finger salute. Judy still felt like things were rushing forward, though her apprehension was beginning to dissolve away. They would spend the day tomorrow driving back to the camp, stay for one last night, and then head out for Tijuana the next day. If all went well, they would be sitting on the beach of their own private retreat in just 2 days, which had prompted Judy to remind V she was going to need to tell Pan Am they were leaving and would not be coming back. At the mention of her name, a frown had formed on V's face. Judy knew it was going to be a difficult conversation, perhaps the most difficult they would ever have, though V had refused her offer of waiting a few days longer to see if it might help. At night, after a pleasant rendezvous under the sheets, they had curled up in bed together. Though she was tired, Judy found it difficult to fall asleep. She was actually looking forward to their next adventure, even if it would be their last together. They continued to talk and plan with one another, the tone of their voices slowly turning quieter until they were barely whispering. Judy wasn't aware of the moment when she drifted asleep. The sound of glass breaking startled her awake. It was just past dawn, and light was streaming through the window. Looking quickly next to her and seeing an empty space where V had laid, Judy bolted out of bed and rushed to the bathroom. "V!" she shouted. "Shit, sorry," she heard V call out from behind the door. With a wave of relief, Judy realized V was only brushing her teeth. As she walked back to the bed and sat down, she grabbed hold of the sheets and steadied herself as she tried to calm the pounding in her chest. She had immediately thought the worst, that something had happened to V, and a distressing thought was beginning to creep its way into her mind. This might be how it happens. One day she might collapse, or worse, I might find her body laying in the tub. Stop. Judy shook the thought out of her head, refusing to succumb to her mounting fears. V was right. This was their time, and she couldn't allow herself to spend every second of it living in fear. Not long after she had thrown her things into her bag, the bathroom door opened, releasing a small cloud of steam as V came out. She had chosen her favorite jeans and black cut-off shirt, which exposed her navel and tattoo which rested above it. Judy bit her lip and felt her arousal growing as V walked towards her. "Sorry I woke you. Was trying to get a jump start on the day. Guess I got a little careless." "It's all right, V. You're always careless. Excited to get a move on, huh?" V nodded as she grabbed her bag and threw it on the bed next to Judy. "Gonna message Pan on the way and let her know we'll be back this afternoon. Not gonna say anything about our plans till we're back, though. She'd tear me a new asshole if I broke that one to her over a text." Judy smiled as she stood. "Sounds like we got a plan. I'm gonna hop in the shower and get cleaned up. Wanna grab breakfast at our favorite spot?" V grinned. "Let's." Judy walked into the bathroom, closing the door behind her. The shattered remains of a glass were resting in the bottom of a nearby wastebasket. What caught her eye, though, was the sink. The pill she had found on the floor the night before was gone. Once again, fear began to creep into her mind. You're not going there, Judy." After showering and indulging herself in her usual morning routine, Judy threw on a pair of black jeans and a white tank top. As she pulled the top over her head, she paused briefly, inhaling deeply as the smell of the clean linen reached her nose. Her grandparents had been kind enough to wash their dirty clothes before they left, allowing them to dry in the sun just like they had done with Judy's clothes when she was a little girl. It was a comforting scent she would forever associate with them. An hour later, their stomachs were stuffed and they were on the road again. V had insisted on taking the wheel this time since at some point they would need to venture off-road and cut through the desert. Though Judy knew it was only a matter of perception, she felt as though the drive back to the camp was going much faster than the drive to Portland had been. V had texted Pan Am shortly after they had left, telling her they were on their way and would likely be back in the late afternoon. Pan Am had replied and given them the all clear. There had been no troubles since they had left, and the sentries had been made aware to keep an eye out for them. In the early afternoon, they were driving along a quiet stretch of road which weaved through the desert when V pulled over. They had reached the point where roads would take them no further, and they would now be returning to the rough and barren terrain which had been their home the last few months. After taking a few moments to stretch, V turned the wheel and they sped off into the desert, leaving a trail of dust in their wake. As V navigated towards the waypoint she had set for the position of the camp, Judy looked out the window. There was little to see, though it felt oddly comforting to be back on the sands. The last week had been a turbulent ride, and the excitement which came from making their own path through the desert matched the excitement she felt for the journey which they would soon be embarking upon. As time passed, the sun continued to make its way overhead. Judy had drifted off at some point during the trek, the rocking and bumping of the car having soothed her into a light sleep. It was only when she felt V's hand on her shoulder that she awoke. "Judy, look at that." Judy looked out the windshield. Perhaps a mile or so away, she could make out a wide cluster of vehicles and tents which rose about the flat horizon. Even from this distance, Judy could see a few faint wisps of smoke rising from the camp. It was a strange sight, knowing that amid the miles of emptiness which surrounded them, the Aldecaldos were thriving in their own little private city. "This'll probably be the last time I see this place." The thought struck her suddenly and without warning, and as she glanced over at V and saw her eyes fixed on the camp, she suspected she was thinking the same thing. Keeping her gaze forward, Judy reached out and gripped V's hand. Together, they took in the sight, both etching it into their memories. With a gentle squeeze, V pulled away, Let's go. V drove forward, and just a minute later, they were passing the sentries who waved at them as they drove by. Coming to a stop next to the line of cars that encircled the camp, V turned off the engine. After sitting in silence for a moment, Judy went first, opening the door and feeling the warm air blast her face. V stepped out as well, grabbing their bags from the back. As Judy stretched, she saw a familiar figure approaching. V? V pulled away from the car, still holding both bags, and turned to the direction of Judy's gaze. Pan Am had gotten the signal they had arrived and was walking towards them. Hey, Pan, V called out. Pan Am didn't reply and only continued to approach them, not slowing down until she reached V. Holding out her arms, she pulled V into a tight embrace. V dropped her bags and hugged her back. Judy tightened her jaw and turned around, the sight of the two friends embracing one another being too much for her to absorb. Finally, Pan Am pulled away. You okay? V nodded. Yeah, I think so. Was a fun trip. Pan Am scoffed. Right. Look, I know you just got back and you don't want to talk about this, V, but I need... Later, Pan, V interrupted. Got some things I need to tell you also. Later. Pan Am searched V's face for a clue on what she was referring to before turning to Judy. Hey, Judy. Judy quickly forced a smile onto her face and turned around. Hey, Pan Am. What's shaking? Judy was surprised when Pan Am walked over and wrapped her arms around her just as she had done to V. For a moment, she stood there, unsure of what to do. When her eyes met V's and she saw her face twisting as she fought back tears, Judy threw her arms around Pan Am. Though she wasn't as close to her as V was, Judy could feel their connection deepening between them in that moment. Bound by their fear and sadness, they comforted each other as V watched. It was only when V spoke that they pulled apart. That's enough of that, Pan. Best get your hands off my gal. Pan Am laughed as she ran a finger across the corner of her eye, wiping away the wetness which had formed there. Relax, Gonk. Looking them over for a moment, Pan Am gestured to the camp. You two look hungry and worn out. Head on in, throw your stuff down and grab a bite. V, I'll track you down in a bit. They did as they were told, Judy following V as they walked the familiar path between tents before coming upon the one which they had called home. Pulling open the entrance, Judy heard V gasp as she stopped in her tracks. Judy took a step forward just behind V and peered inside, unable to contain her own gasp of surprise. Though the dimensions of the tent remained unchanged, it was a completely different space than the one they had left behind. The sand and dirt, which had lined the bottom of the tent for months, was now covered with several throws which had been spaced out and stitched together. The bedding on their cot had been completely switched out, a plush deep pink duvet and set of throw pillows now adorning the mattress. The same table and chair still sat near the corner, though Judy noticed an additional monitor had been added. Under the table, she caught sight of several boxes of Max Docs and other medical equipment. Most striking, though, was the string of lights which dangled from the top of the tent, each glowing a gentle hue of pink. V's hands instinctively covered her mouth, and Judy found it impossible to keep the tears out of her own eyes as she placed her hands on V's shoulders, feeling her starting to shake. Oh, fuck. Why? Why did they do all this? V asked as her voice quivered. Judy nestled her chin into V's neck, squeezing her shoulders. 'Cause you're their family, V, and they love you. Come on. Gently guiding V to the bed, she sat her down before quickly pulling the chair away from the corner and dragging it in front of V, sitting down across from her. V was sobbing lightly, still looking around the tent in amazement. You all right? Judy asked. V nodded. Yeah, just makes it harder to say goodbye is all. We could stay a bit longer, V, like I mentioned. No. We gotta do this. V was sniffling and wiping away her tears. Judy stared at V, not bothering to hide the sympathy from her face. Do you want me to talk to Pan Am first? V shook her head as she sniffed once more, collecting herself. No, I'll do it. V stood and walked out of the tent, leaving Judy alone. She glanced around, noticing someone had stashed a few bottles of Senson under their bed. Judy was appreciative beyond words at everything they had done for them, but couldn't help feeling remorse. The Aldecaldos had gone out of their way to try to see to their every need. More importantly, to do what they could to make V feel comfortable and happy in the coming months. And they were going to leave tomorrow. Standing up, Judy dragged the chair back over to the table before sitting down once more. Looking at their bags, which V had clumsily dropped near the entrance, she wasn't sure what to do with herself. Do we pack or unpack? Judy sat there, frozen and uncertain as she bit her nails while thinking through her options. Her indecisiveness becoming intolerable, she stood once more and left the tent, deciding that some food would do her good. Walking between the tents, she was pleased to find some noodles and pierogies being cooked nearby and quickly filled a plate. She knew she would think better on a full stomach. As she sat down to eat, she noticed some of the others around her casting glances her way. When Judy would make eye contact, they would smile and wave. She was startled when a hand tapped against her shoulder. There she is, Mitch yelled out as he sat down next to her. Judy smiled. Hey Mitch, how's things? Can't complain. Camp's been doing good. No sign of any scabs or corpos out here. Good. Judy tossed another pierogi in her mouth, eyeing Mitch as she chewed. So, did you have something to do with our tent? Though he tried to keep a straight face, a small grin turned his lips upwards. Maybe. Judy smiled. Thanks, Mitch. It's Nova. V loves it. Gotta give credit to Pan Am. Was her idea. She's been sending us into town the last couple days to get any kind of medical supplies we can find for V. Again, a stab of regret hit Judy as she set down her plate, which she had cleared. You're a real choom, you know that, Mitch? Wish I would have known a few more folks like you back in Night City. Might still be there if I had. Mitch nodded. Well, then it's a good thing you didn't. Otherwise you wouldn't be here with us. Of course, imagine you won't be with us much longer, will you? Judy looked at Mitch, aware that her widened eyes had likely already revealed the truth. She sighed. V's hell-bent on getting us to some dream vacation she's planned out. Wants to leave tomorrow. Mitch looked away, and Judy could see a hint of sadness on his face. I get it. Don't worry about the tent. Only thing you'll want to take with you are the Mac stocks. And in case you're wondering, was walking this way and overheard Pan and V. All things considered, think their chat was going well. Judy glanced at the people moving around her. Never thought I would say this, but I'm really gonna miss this place. Miss the people. We're gonna miss you too, kid, Mitch said, keeping his eyes focused in front of him. Hearing footsteps approaching behind her, Judy turned to see V. Her face was flushed, and her eyes were bloodshot. She had been crying, and had the look of someone who had just crushed the hopes of her best friend. Hey! Judy quickly stood and hugged V close. V embraced her but pulled away quickly. It's okay. We're good now. Pan's on board. Just no more crying today, alright? Judy smiled. Music to my ears, V. You need some grub? Thought you'd never ask. Not long after, V had finished her plate while Judy sat next to her. The sun was setting on the horizon, and once again, the activity in the camp was picking up as fires were being lit and bottles were being opened. All right, you two lovebirds, Pan Am's voice yelled out, causing Judy and V to whirl around. If we're really gonna do this, we're gonna send you out on a high note. Aldecaldos, gather round. The camp suddenly turned quiet as everyone began to congregate in a circle around them. Judy and V looked at each other, unsure what Panam was planning. Panam grabbed a bottle of tequila from a young man who was standing next to her and stepped on top of a nearby crate. I want all of you to grab a glass, or bottle, or whatever you can drink out of. Panam stopped and pointed at them. Wait, someone get them something, stat. Panam had barely finished speaking when a pair of beers were thrust in front of Judy and V. Taking them, Judy was surprised to see it was Carol who had brought them. The woman nodded her head before resuming her place with the rest of the group. Good. Now, back to business. Raise your drinks. The crowd did as they were told, Judy and V awkwardly raising their own. I was going to say that tomorrow, one of our family is going to leave us, setting off for greener pastures, which ain't hard to find considering we're out in the middle of the fucking desert. But that's bullshit. Truth is, we're losing 2 members of our family tomorrow. Judy felt V's hand take hold of her own. Panam continued. Judy, the last few months, you've lived beside us, helped us, and looked after members of this family as though they were your own. That makes you every bit as much a part of this family as the rest of us, every bit as much an Aldecaldo as the rest of us, from this day till your last day. Judy breathed out a small laugh as she shook her head. Fuck, I just told V no more crying. Panam's voice lowered, now speaking directly to them. We are gonna hate losing you, both of you. But just know, you'll always have a home here. You'll always have a family here, no matter what. So, as someone wiser than myself once said, to haboobs! To haboobs! The crowd jeered as they laughed. Judy was grateful for the noise as it drowned out the sounds of her sobbing. V turned to Judy, beaming as she wrapped an arm around her. Looks like you're gonna need another tattoo. Don't know where it would go, Panam said to her as she stepped down and walked to them. Judy was nearly pulled off her feet as Panam threw an arm around her, crossing over V's. She then murmured in a low voice only Judy and V could hear. I mean that, Judy. You're part of this family now. You ever need anything, and I mean fucking anything, you ask, alright? Just don't ask me for a jacket right now. Turns out we're a little short on some good rags at the moment, but promise, I'll get you one. Judy couldn't have cared less about the jacket. Thanks, Pan. Think it'll really tie my look together. Well, look at you. Finally got around to calling me Pan. Together they laughed, before Panam nodded her head towards a nearby campfire. Let's get this party started, shall we? The hours flew by as the sun disappeared below the horizon and the stars popped into sight above them. The sounds of their laughter filled the air as bottle after bottle was opened and emptied. Judy couldn't recall a time in recent memory when she had felt as carefree as she did now. Watching V and Panam harass and play off each other, she knew they were both endeavoring to make the night last as long as possible, likely both aware this would be the last evening they would ever see each other. But unlike all the other times they had spent around the campfire, this was different for another reason. Judy was acutely aware she was now an actual member of this family, an outsider no more. It was comforting to know that no matter what the future had in store for her and V, she would always have people who would look out for her, a home she could return to. Judy had been lost deep in her thoughts when a sudden shout snapped her out of them. You are way too chicken shit for that, V, Panam yelled at V, laughing. Fuck you, Pan. Face down way scarier shit in my time. You ever see that crazy fuck Ozob? Judy glanced back and forth between them, trying to understand what they were talking about. Then, you won't mind making a friendly wager, will you? Panam taunted with a devilish grin. Do your worst, Pan. Judy didn't like where this was headed. All right, Panam continued. When I win, you gotta run bare ass all around the perimeter of the whole damn camp. And all I want to hear the whole time is you shouting, "To haboobs." V laughed as she shook her head. All right, fair enough. Just know, though, that when I win, you're the one who's going to be doing all the running. That sound you'll hear while you're running will be me laughing my ass off at you. Starting to feel a twinge of panic, Judy interjected, Wait, what's going on? V stood up and turned to her. Pan doesn't think that your girl here can ride her bike in the dark. Gonna show her how a true Night City legend does it. Wait, you're gonna ride out in the fucking desert at night? Isn't that dangerous? Not as much as you'd think, Judy. The sands out here are flat, and us nomads learn how to cruise at night early on. But V here, she's a city kid. Nice, bright traffic lights everywhere she went. Can't handle night riding. V glared at Pan Am. I'm gonna make you regret those fucking words. And with that, she spun around and strutted towards the trailer, which was parked near the edge of the camp. As Pan Am got up to follow, Judy stopped her. Pan, this seems like a really bad idea. She's been drinking, you've been drinking, hell, we've all been drinking, and she could get really hurt out there. Pan Am rolled her eyes and gestured for Judy to follow her. Relax, Judy. Yes, we've been drinking, but I'd never let her get near that bike if we were back in the outskirts of Night City. Fucking rocks and cacti everywhere. Out here, the sands are smooth and give good traction, barely a rock for miles. And if she were to fall off, even at high speed, she'd be little more than bumped and bruised. Sand would act like a cushion. There's no real risk to her other than bruising her ego, which is totally gonna happen. As they weaved their way through the tents, Judy pressed on. Then what's the catch? Why such a big deal if there's no risk? Pan smiled. It's a pure adrenaline rush. When you ride out there at night, Judy, you can't see a fucking thing. Almost feels like you're cruising into an abyss. It's terrifying. As they rounded a parked camper, Judy stopped. V stood a few yards away from them, running her hand across the smooth chrome surface of her motorbike. Her eyes seemed distant, an almost sad expression on her face. Come on now, V. You know you're scared shitless to be driving out there. Just one lap around the camp is all. V glanced over her shoulder, the same sad expression in her eyes. Her voice was level, detached even. Only one thing scares me now, Pan. With that, she quickly straddled the seat and started the engine, revving it several times. Kicking back the kickstand, she leaned forward and sped off. Judy watched the dim red light attached to the back of the bike slowly disappear into the night, the only sign of her presence being the fading sounds of the bike's engine. Pan Am took a step forward. Fuck. She's actually doing it. As seconds turned to minutes, Judy began to worry. There was no sign of V anywhere, and the images of her lying on the ground screaming in pain began to flash through her mind. Before long, Judy glanced down at her holo. She had been gone for nearly 15 minutes. Something had to be wrong. Shoving her holo back into her pocket, she was about to demand they go looking for her when she heard a faint rumble in the distance. Peering intently into the darkness, Judy could faintly make out a light approaching. A few moments later, V returned to the camp. Turning off the engine, she sat back and ran a hand through her hair before stepping off. Judy noticed what she thought were tears on her cheeks, though whether she had been crying or if it had simply been the wind rushing across her face, she couldn't tell. Strolling towards them, V smiled. Nice night for a jog, eh, Pan? Panam crossed her arms, her brow scrunching in annoyance. Fuck off, V. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm dead fucking serious. No more stalling. Start running. Judy found herself taking a small step forward, edging herself slightly between them. This had all the potential to turn into something serious, but before her fears could be realized, Panam threw her hands in the air. You're a complete fucking gonk, you know that? Panam plopped herself onto the ground and began to take off her boots. Glancing up at Judy, her face became even more flushed. Fucking bullshit. V turned to Judy. Tell you what, why don't you head back to our spot? I'll be there in just a minute. Feeling relieved to not have to stand there awkwardly and watch Panam strip off her pants, Judy turned and walked back to the campfire. As she approached, she made sure to grab a few cold beers and an open bottle of tequila before sitting down. She had a feeling they were going to be needed soon. Not long after she sat down, V emerged from between the tents. Just as V sat down, Judy began to hear a woman's voice yelling in the distance. As the shouting continued, she could faintly hear the sound of scattered laughter from around the camp. V chuckled to herself. She is so pissed right now. It was totally worth it. Judy took a drink from her beer and looked at V. Hope so, V. Was a pretty reckless stunt. Could have gotten hurt. Bad. Don't know why you had to go and do that. V leaned forward and picked up the bottle of tequila Judy had grabbed, taking a small drink. She turned to Judy. You want to know why? It wasn't because of any stupid bet Pan tried to goad me into. I'm not that stupid, Jude. I just realized this was gonna be the last time I took out Jackie's ride. Last time I ride, period. And I had some stuff to get off my chest. V had spoken to her about Jackie before, though she had been scarce on the details. Judy knew he had been a close friend of V's who had been involved in the heist which had gone bad, resulting in the state V was in now, and he had caught a bullet and died that very night. Still, she felt there was so much she didn't know, though she had chosen long ago not to push V on the topic. Judy realized their relationship probably hadn't been all that different from hers and Evelyn's, and V had reciprocated by giving her space and not prodding into their friendship. Some things, she supposed, were best left on the inside. Care to tell me what it is you needed to get off your chest which you just couldn't say to me? V looked at her, a strange expression on her face. You'll see. One day. As the fire continued to burn, Judy became aware it was getting quieter. More of the Aldecaldos had ventured back to their tents, ready to call an end to the day. The sound of approaching steps roughly shuffling across the sand behind them were hard to miss. You know, V, I'm the fucking leader of this clan. Not easy to lead when I'm running around the camp half naked. Panam's voice cut through the air, her anger infusing every syllable. V sighed. Come on, Pan. You know damn well you'd be sitting here next to Judy laughing your ass off if it had been me. And look at it this way. It's the last bet you'll ever lose to me. Panam stopped. The anger had quickly dissipated from her face. God damn you, V. You know what? Not tonight. We're not talking about this tonight. I'm gonna pack it in. You're gonna fucking be here in the morning, right? Yeah, Pan. We'll be here. Panam nodded. Judy noticed her eyes were glistening in the light from the fire. All right. I'll see you tomorrow then. Yeah. See you tomorrow, Pan. V's voice was low. As Panam turned and walked away, Judy edged herself closer to V. Tomorrow's gonna be a hard day, huh? Judy asked. V nodded. Yeah. Really fucking hard. They sat together in silence for a few minutes, staring into the fire. A light gust of wind brushed against Judy's skin, causing her to shudder. She glanced down at her hollow. "We should get some sleep, V. It's late. Or, rather, it's early. We've got a real cozy place close by just waiting for us." V smiled and stood, taking hold of Judy's hand as they walked back to the tent. As Judy followed her inside, she was again hit with a sense of melancholy. Everything they did in this place, everything they saw or experienced, it was all going to be for the last time. As V threw her jacket onto the throws which covered the floor and began to undress, Judy picked it up. The black leather was heavy, adorned with a variety of patches and stitched patterns. Several silver zippers lined its cracked surface. An idea crossed her mind. V continued to strip down to her underwear and bra before reaching into her bag. "Judy, did you see my sweatshirt? I didn't pack it, but..." Judy put her hand on V's shoulder, causing her to stop and glance over. V's mouth dropped. Judy had stripped out of her clothes. The only thing which covered her now was V's jacket, which she had quietly slipped into. It hung heavy on her shoulders, clinging snugly to the contours of her body. Having left the front unzipped, it left little to the imagination. "Get over here, Aldecaldo," Judy purred. Nearly an hour later, they lay in bed together. Judy was still wearing the jacket while V slept next to her. Her eyes were growing heavy as she stared at the pink lights which hung dimly above her. "I'm really going to miss this place." Judy's thoughts drifted back to what she had told V when they had left Night City, how she had separated her own life into phases. As she slowly drifted off to sleep, she was faintly aware she was about to close the chapter on another phase of her life and enter another. What that new phase would be, though, was something which eluded her. Judy slept peacefully, occasionally shifting as either her or V shuffled in their sleep. It was only when Judy became aware of faint noise around her that she opened her eyes. It was morning. She could hear the faint shuffling and talking of the few Aldecaldos who were awake outside their tent. Judy blinked away the last hints of sleep from her eyes. The light outside was still dim, hinting it was going to be a cloudy morning. As she turned her head, she saw V splayed out next to her, still sleeping. Judy was about to roll onto her side and pull her closer when she noticed the sweat on V's brow. Lifting her head from the pillow to look closer, Judy saw the blanket which V had pulled over her shoulder during the night was damp. V's skin was pale and clammy. But what was most distressing to her, though, was how V was breathing. Shallow, ragged gasps were escaping from her lips as though each breath were a struggle. With a jolt of panic, Judy shot up in bed. "V!" Shaking V, she felt a wave of relief as V's eyes popped open. "Judy? What's happening? Where am I going?" V's voice was completely detached from herself, as though there was someone else within her speaking the words. Though her face was filled with confusion, there was an absence of fear which Judy found disturbing. You just need your pill. Hang on." Judy sprung out of bed and raced to V's bag, rummaging as quickly as she could through her clothes before seizing upon the bottle. Rushing back to V's side, she popped the lid off and dumped the contents in her hand before taking one and handing it to V, who had seemed to come to her senses. She quickly popped it in her mouth. Judy stared intently at V, desperately wishing she could do something more to help her. She brushed her hands through V's hair while she lay next to her. V was trying to catch her breath as slowly the color returned to her cheeks, her breathing easing and deepening. "Fuck," V managed in a weak voice. "That was strange." Judy continued to run her fingers through V's hair, her own panic slowly subsiding. "Are you okay?" You scared the fuck out of me, V. V looked at her. I'm okay, Judy. Now. I think I was starting to slip away there. Felt like I was being lifted away someplace. As her lip quivered and the first tears spilled down Judy's cheeks, V reached up and cupped her cheek. Don't be afraid, Judy. It wasn't scary. I'm not afraid anymore. Judy sobbed as she leaned closer to V. She couldn't stand to hear V talk this way, as though she were already slipping away from her. She wrapped her arm around V and gripped her tightly. That's not what you said last night, V. It told me there was still something that scared you. V's eyes widened. Oh, Judy, no. I'm not afraid of this anymore. I'm not. Didn't mean to make you think that. Judy shook her head as she rested against V's, her body still shaking as sobs escaped her. Then what? What are you afraid of, V? Judy, I'm afraid of you holding on to me when I'm gone. I know you promised me you'll let go, and I believe you with every fiber I got left in me, but you're still holding on to me so fucking tightly, Jude. I'm afraid you won't let go. That's what scares me. Judy remained silent as she laid next to V. She was right. Judy had promised V she would live on when she died, and she had meant it. But it was beginning to slowly dawn upon her that soon she would need to live up to that promise, whether she wanted to or not, and it terrified her. She wanted to keep V even closer to her in a vain hope she could somehow keep her alive. Soon, though, she would be gone no matter how tightly she tried to hold on to her. Do we gotta do this now? Judy managed to say. She felt V's hand rest upon the top of her head. Not yet, Jude. Soon, though, and all the more reason for us to get a move on. Judy sniffed and wiped the tears away from her eyes. You're right. We're not gonna waste one more fucking second. Are you ready to Delta? Yeah, it's time. With a renewed sense of urgency, they slid out of bed and dressed themselves before throwing their belongings into their bags. Judy stuffed as much as possible into them until they were nearly bursting at the seams, then dragged them outside the tent before awkwardly dropping them to the ground. Rushing back inside, she nearly collided into V, who was carrying a pair of boxes which held the Max Stocks, a few bottles of the Senson hastily thrown on top. Passing by her, Judy stacked as many boxes as she could before picking them up and rushing them outside. V had picked up their bags and was already walking with them towards the car. Judy ducked back into the tent and stopped. All which was left were the throws on the ground, the bare table and chair, and the mattress which rested on a simple wire frame. After a brief moment of hesitation, she quickly pulled the lights down from the tent and tossed them on top of the boxes outside. She stopped to take a final look at the space which had been her home for nearly the last 4 months. It had been such a simple place, small by even the humblest of standards. Yet as she turned and left, she felt a stab of pain she hadn't experienced before. Every place she had left behind in her life she had associated with some type of pain. This place, though, this place had remained clean. Stepping back outside, she saw V approaching as she picked up the last of the boxes and carried them over to the car. V had left the back doors open, allowing Judy to shove the last of their belongings in. Glancing to her side, she noticed V's motorbike was still parked not too far away. She wished there was a way they could bring it with them. After cramming the last of their belongings into the car, V turned around. I need to say goodbye to Pan. Wait here. Promise I won't take too long. V started to walk away, but was startled when Judy kept pace with her. Fuck that, V. We are going to say goodbye. She's my friend too, you know. They hadn't taken more than a few steps away from the car before Judy spotted Pan walking through the camp. When her eyes met theirs, she nodded and began heading towards them. See, you two aren't wasting any time. You got everything you need? Yeah, we're good, V replied. Good. Back to the car, all of us. Pan's voice was resolute, leaving no room for question as they turned back. Max stocks, food, water. You sure you're fully packed? Ready as we'll ever be, Pan. As they reached the car, V and Pan stopped and faced one another, while Judy leaned back against the truck. She knew this was going to be their moment, and it was going to be hard. All right, Pan said in a composed voice as she looked around, slowly nodding to herself as though she were searching for something. As her eyes met V's gaze, though, her lower lip began to quake, and her face suddenly twisted as tears began to spill from her eyes. Hey, V reached out and pulled Pan in, holding her tightly as she began to cry. I wish I could talk you out of this. You're my best fucking friend, V, Pan said between sobs. I want you to know that. My sister. Don't want to lose you. Judy glanced down and turned away, venturing a few steps away from them to provide more privacy. She could hear V beginning to sob. I know. You're not losing me, Pan. Setting me free, rather. Would never have made it this far without you. I love you, Pan. The two friends held each other for a long time, neither of them wanting to let go. Finally, Pan pulled away, wiping the tears from her face. She turned to Judy and waved her over. Judy? Okay, here we go. Keep it together. Judy turned to face her and walked towards Pan. As soon as she was close enough, Pan reached out and embraced her. Judy felt tears welling in her eyes as she felt Pan shaking. Pulling her head slightly back, Pan spoke in a hushed whisper which only she could hear. If you need anything at all, you just call. When it happens, Judy, you call me, all right? I don't want you to be alone then. No fucking way. I'll be there for you. All of us. You hear me? You're never going to be alone again. Judy only nodded, her breath coming in stuttered shakes. Take care of our girl, Pan spoke in a louder voice as she pulled away, wiping her face. V smiled, even as tears were spilling down her cheeks. I'll be in good hands. Pan managed a small smile. Goodbye, V. Judy felt the weight of Pan's words, the meaning behind them obvious. It took every ounce of strength she had left within her to maintain her composure as she started towards the driver's side of the car. Goodbye, Pan, V said in a weak voice as she turned and sat down in the passenger seat, closing the door behind her. Judy sat down next to her and closed her door. It was just the two of them now. She turned to look at V. Sure you're ready? V glanced at her a moment before turning her gaze back to the windshield. No time like the present, Jude. Judy nodded as she turned the key and started the ignition. After switching it into gear, she slowly began to pull away from the camp and towards the direction of the waypoint they had set, which would guide them to the main roads. Keep driving, V said as she sat up in her seat and opened the sunroof. Judy couldn't keep a small smile from crossing her lips as she knew what was coming next and slowed down to allow V more time. V stood up through the sunroof, the wind blowing her hair wildly across her face. V turned around, facing Pan who was watching them leave. To her boobs! V shouted at the top of her lungs as she thrust her fist into the air, Even over the rumble of the engine and the sound of wind rushing through the sunroof, this time, Judy could clearly hear Pan Am yell back to them. Looking in the rearview mirror, she saw Pan Am waving back at them before her hands pulled back and covered her face, her head bowing low as she broke down once more. Judy pressed on as V slid back down, closing the sunroof. "You okay, V?" "Yeah," V replied. "Let's go home."